Let me come to Honorable Ssemujju. Honorable Ssemujju,
Yeah.
how valid and effective is this constitution 30 years later?
Is it still there?
The validity and the effectiveness of the constitution.
I was in Mbale 2017
Mm.
with the colleagues challenging the removal of age limit. One of the arguments by our lawyers, I think the Lord Mayor, was that the foundation, you started with the preamble, the foundation, so the key pillars in the constitution had been removed, because this constitution was made mainly to deal with issues of transferring power from one person to another. The term limit was removed, the age limit was removed. That's why now you have a life presidency. And I think the argument of Lukwago and other lawyers, the Honorable Dan Ogalo was representing Law Society in that case, was that the moment you removed the term limit, and what remained was the age limit, this is no longer the 1995 Constitution, one that was meant to deal with the history of no president handing over power to another, history of all presidents being removed through violent means. So one of the things this constitution was supposed to deal with was to ensure we don't repeat that history. What we have today, you may not have the power to remove, but maybe for the first time you'll have one military man handing over transfer to his son, like it happened in Togo under Yadema. So yeah, the basic principles in the constitution, the pillars were removed. So this is not even an NRM, but a M7 constitution now. All these NRM people are just serving. So the 1995 constitution, there was an attempt to restore the term limit, but because of the way it was done, courts, I mean, both the Constitutional Court was unable to keep it, and subsequently the Supreme Court. So, so really the 1995 Constitution made to address our problems. It's not, I mean, I don't see, even the ritual that remains is not followed. I don't think we are governed by the Constitution anymore. And I don't even think that the president thinks this country is governed by the Constitution. This country is governed by President Museveni and his family. It is no longer, I mean, that you have a Constitution to speak about, that you have a contract. So and I pity people who work for government that they are interpreting, because there is no interpretation that you offer. All that has gone. We are in a full military dictatorship. They will invade the court, they will arrest people, even Parliament itself. I was a victim when they were during the consideration of the term limit. We were removed in Parliament violently by the special forces, detained at various police stations. So we are under military dictatorship. The Constitution maybe is for purposes of public relations, that you can keep referring to it. We have a Constitution in Uganda. Yes, it exists. The physical Constitution exists, but we are no longer governed under or by the Constitution. We are governed by the military. If they say we'll beat you, they will beat you. If they want to invade the court, they will invade. And they have invaded the courts on several occasions, even telling judges that what works here are people who went to the war to fight and remove the government, so don't disturb them. So really the 1995 Constitution, maybe what is there to celebrate is the history, that it is now 30 years since it was promulgated. but there is nothing to celebrate about this constitution.
Honorable Ssemujju, you seem to create a whole debacle of hopelessness, especially looking at 2017, the removal, but we also have the 2005 getting to multi-partyism. And also Honorable Dan Wandera is here. They fought against having the movement system nationalized. Isn't that a benefit from the constitution that we would celebrate as a country?
The party is functioning. I was in Chankwanza as a journalist, and President Museveni made it very clear. He said we should allow parties to operate, and he gave 3 reasons. He says, first, these multi-parties, they go outside the country and speak bad about us. He said, point number 2, we have children who never experienced, in fact he used the word, he says they have MP of democracy. They are disturbing us that parties should return. But he also had people he had wanted to remove from the ruling, the NRM. So he said, and that's why his slogan during the referendum was to Ejeko. So the parties in theory also return. But these parties are not operating like political parties, free to assemble, free to associate. I don't know how many times we've been invaded at our headquarters, taken over by the military. Almost all the parties, look at what is happening, I mean, at national unity platform, whether in the campaigns, whether it's in a normal day-to-day running of parties. So yes, parties were restored. In theory, we exist, but in practice, I think the restrictions have remained. I was covering the committee on legal, either chaired by Honorable Ben Wacha and deputized by Honorable Ogalo, or vice versa.
Vice versa.
The first Political Parties and Organizations Act, the bill that was brought in Parliament, the President wanted political parties' activities limited at their headquarters. He put it in the law. The MPs attempted to change a bit. He refused to assent to the bill. It was brought back. And that's the frame under which the President said now parties can operate. He wants them to operate, so you can have a headquarter, you can sit there. When it comes to opening branches, even offices, you're going to meet police, you're going to meet the military. So yes, parties are there. I belong to PFF, in which I am serving as a chief of staff. But PFF cannot be allowed to go and open branches, functional, meet people, recruit, address rallies. So we are where we are, where we were before even the parties returned. So in theory, the parties are there, but the limitations have remained. And that's what the President wanted, and that's what he announced in Chankwanza, that we can allow these parties because we will go to beg for money from donors, then they will disturb us. But now we'll and they kept demanding that, why don't you restore pluralism in Uganda? He said, now we have restored. But Uganda really, we can pretend about it, but we are under military dictatorship.
Okay. Let me bring in the AG. Honorable Kiryowa Kiwanuka, 30 years later, you as the principal legal advisor both to government but also one of the custodians of this constitution. Is this constitution still relevant, and is it fit for purpose when you look in hindsight, posterity?
Yes, thank you very much, Timothy. First of all, of course, it is still relevant and it is functional. You know, of course, unlike Honorable Ssemujju, who will start everything and start everything with President Museveni, I think we lose focus on the issues. This constitution is about the principles of sovereignty of the people, accountability, governance, and of course the bills of right and etc. But this constitution is not a static. It's not a static item. When Honorable Ssemujju talks about the history of Uganda, he seems that to believe that the history of Uganda is only the history of Uganda as at 1995. because we've had 30 years, and even those 30 years are history. So when you talk about a constitution, you're talking about dealing with the history of the country. So the people who made the 1995 constitution had the history of Uganda before 1995. So they made the constitution with that history in mind. Of course, they did not have the benefit of foresight, or not foresight, of seeing the future. They had the benefit of foresight when they said, look, if this history changes, if the circumstances change, then they put provisions for us to keep dealing with the aspirations of the people as they exist at any given time. So if you ever think about a constitution, you should not think about it as a static item. It is supposed to be dynamic. It is supposed to address the issues that are being addressed at that time. In fact, it's no wonder when you talk about the young people saying, what is this all about? Because the question may be that we should be asking ourselves, is the constitution addressing the aspirations now of those people? Because the aspirations of the people that were there in 1995 is what informed the constitution that we are dealing with. So the constant changes and the issues that go on with the constitution are now dealing with the emerging issues. So history is not static. So when we talk about age limit, term limit, all these things that have been changing over time, we vulgarize the constitution because we seem to talk about only 2 provisions in this constitution. This constitution has been amended probably like 12 times over the years. But when we talk about this thing, you'll find people just talking about age limit, term limit, age limit, term limit. But I don't think anyone has ever discussed what the changes that, like you said, on multi-party. We haven't discussed the changes in the local government management. We haven't discussed the changes that so there's so many things that change over time. The question we should be asking ourselves, what is it that we need to do to make the constitution even more relevant to us at this time? So the constitution is definitely relevant because look, we are here. You're calling me Attorney General. You're calling me Attorney General by virtue of the constitution. Honorable Ssemujju is Member of Parliament by virtue of the constitution. So how does he get into the parliament? Through the election by the people. So all these things that have been changing, that have been happening, are supposed to be dynamically addressing the challenges that exist at the time. If we sit down and say we should go back to the 1995 constitution, the question is, whose history are we dealing with? So do we discount the 30 years that we have existed? And what are the challenges that we have been dealing with in the 30 years? Don't we need to address them? So there are many things that we need to look at when you're discussing a constitution. For example, we look at one of the burning issues that we have to deal with here today is, say, the question of land. We have had a history about land. Is the constitution addressing that issue? How is it addressing it? What do we need to do to be able to address the issues of land? Now, the problem that we had of land in 1995 was dealing with a population of, I think, 13 million at the time, 15 million. The land in Uganda has not increased by a square kilometer. It has remained static since 1995. The population has increased to 45 million people. How do we deal with that situation? I think that is what we as leaders need to be looking at and finding out what is it that we are dealing with. So this issue, and I'm happy that Honorable Ssemujju raises it, because the court addressed it and said, no. And I think even Honorable Justice Odoke Emeritus just now just said you can change all of it. If the people of Uganda want to change all of it today, they can change it. The question is, what are you addressing? Is that what the people want at the time?
And that's exactly the question I want to put to you, because you say demanding issues. But also when I look at the preamble, it is specific on political, constitutional, and instability of our history. What are these emerging issues you are talking about?
Yeah, because now the instability we had before the 33 years before the constitution is not the instability we are having now. You understand? So the issue we are dealing with now is different. So if his concern is how do we change power, we are saying, but the constitution is telling you how to change it. Has it failed? It hasn't failed. So you're saying if the people of Uganda still want President Museveni to be in office, We should not allow it because some few people don't want it to be. Now, the problem here is you are saying that they remove these for him, but the people who remove them are representatives of the people. So Article 1 of the Constitution is talking about the sovereignty of the people. How do you exercise the sovereignty of the people? Now, if the sovereignty of the people is exercised by them electing people who come to Parliament and do that which they have been elected to do, we can't turn around and say it is not, but alternatively we could change and say that the Constitution, we go to the people and say the Constitution of Uganda should remain static, it should never change for the next 50 years. So that's the balance. So that's the balance we need to find. What has worked? What has not worked? What can we do better? But to say that there is no constitution or that the constitution is there on paper while we are all operating under the same constitution, we are operating in parliament every day, and every day we are quoting provision this of the constitution, provision that of the constitution. So we cannot cherry pick. We can say, okay, we don't think that works. We take it back to the people, because that is the fundamental here. So when we say the basic tenets of the Constitution, the basic tenet of this Constitution is sovereignty of the people. That's the basic tenet. What the people want to do with their country is what the people should do. And I think, for me, that's what I think. So we really do have a Constitution, and because this Constitution is written by a man, and man is not going to play God on earth, yeah, there will be mistakes that will be made, but the Constitution itself has mechanisms of correcting those nuances.
And I'll come back to some of the things you've mentioned there, especially when we come to the part of governance. Dr. Sarah, AG mentioned something interesting, especially Article 1 that talks about the sovereignty of the people. Are the people of this country sovereign? And where are the people in this Constitution? Because when I look at what Honorable Ssemujju was talking about, removal of the age limit in 2017, 80% of the people said not to it, but the members that represent them went ahead and did the inverse.
I think the Constitution as a document or a framework, which is known as a grand norm, was good, save for the few provisions on limiting political freedoms. But generally, and like the documentary we watched before, I think the men and women of Uganda who took time to participate in the constitutional making process did a good job, commendable. I think the question we should interrogate as citizens is, where did we go wrong? Because we have the legal framework, yes. We can't say that we don't have the Constitution, but the Constitution is not self-executing. So what happened after promulgation? We are running the theme on guardians of the Constitution, and we hope to take some lessons from South Africa, given the journey they've walked. Some of the instances similar, some different. How best should we have guarded the Constitution? When you go to Article 3, yes, Article 1 is sovereignty of the people. Article 2, related. But when you go to Article 3, it says the people must protect the Constitution and refuse any persons or authority from abrogating the Constitution. When you go to other frameworks of the Constitution, you will find the institutions of governance, like the Human Rights Commission, the Legal Reform Commission, you have the Electoral Commission, the IG, Inspector of Government. These are the accountability institutions that were put to work as supportive checks and balances to the three arms of government. The first collapse of the Constitution, in my view, happens at the institution of Parliament. in terms of substance, and with all due respect, I know they are good MPs. It's not that everybody really lacks. So I have to put that disclaimer that when we are talking about the institution of parliament, it's not that everybody is wanting, no. So the institution of parliament had a lot of responsibility deriving from Article 79 on protection of the Constitution, making laws for the order, development, and good governance of the country, among others. Some laws have been found wanting by courts of law, especially political laws. And I think it's deliberate, in my view as an activist. Some of the sections that have been found to be unconstitutional by our constitutional court are enacted deliberately. It's not that it's out of ignorance. For example, the Public Order Management Act, Section 8. You have a section outlawed in the Mwanga Chivumbi case versus Attorney General. You bring it back in a new law, yet the Constitution is clear under Article 92 that you cannot legislate to defeat the purpose of a court decision or any part of the judgment. And people are told, look, this is retrospective, legislation. But deliberately, because the framers of that provision know this is a political law, we shall make it, implement it. By the time the courts get about outlawing it, we'll have achieved our political aims. That's how the Constitution is manipulated in bits and bits. Why would you bring a law that is deliberately unconstitutional? Yet these are very intelligent people, super intelligent. So those are some of the things that have weakened constitutionalism in this country. When you look at the functioning of parliament, the checks and balances that they are supposed to do, I like comparing the quality of the Constituent Assembly that people have watched out there with the current quality today. 30 years down the road, we are supposed to be better in terms of human development. So why is it that the quality is worse and disappointing? What has gone wrong? And I'm sure people have watched. If you look at the debate in the Constituent Assembly, if we brought to the Constituent Assembly men and women today and pressed them back to Parliament, this country would skyrocket to a first world nation, I have no doubt. I remember the words of Honorable Apakabro, the late, when he was in Kenya sharing about the experience of the 1995 constitution making process. He stated that unless Ugandans disrupt themselves, but with this constitution, Uganda should be a first world nation after 20 years. We are now celebrating or commemorating 30 years. Are we a first world nation? So how come that the vision and hopes of the likes of the late Wapakabro can't be realized? How can we as a people, our illiteracy rates have gone, we are almost at 80%, very educated, very many people, we are healthy, living longer. Why is it that we have a lower and a more degenerating quality of leadership as compared to where we were at 30 years? How can we develop in reverse in terms of leadership? What is it? What is the problem? Why is it that we have a quality of members of parliament that have no capacity to protect the constitution? And yet their key function is protecting the constitution. But do they have the capacity? How many MPs can you ask to cite 5 articles of the constitution or even know where to find them? Because the best person, it's not cramming the law. At least do they know where to find it? How many? I don't think they go beyond 50. So why is it that we produce this quality of leadership? The third missing gap is the people. Article 4 of the Constitution provided that the Constitution be translated and taught to citizens in their local languages. I know that there was a first translation of the Constitution. I've landed on a copy in Ateso. I haven't got the Runyankore version, which is my language. Few copies were made. Translations in 8 key languages were made. But has anybody of us ever seen the distribution of these copies to our communities? Has there been any effort 30 years down the road to sensitize the people? How can the people, whose duty is to protect the Constitution, protect what they don't know? That's impossible. So that's the third missing link on why the Constitution has not served its purpose. So when you go to the journey we've walked, of course there are few achievements. You have a framework. I think the Constitution works only where the powers deem it to work. Let's look at the simple aspects of fundamental rights and freedoms. Article 23. When you go to arrest a person, introduce yourself, inform the person of the crime they are suspected of committing, tell their next of kin where they are going to be detained, allow access of family, doctors, lawyers, produce them in court within 48 hours. It's the most abused provision in this country, to the extent that we have abductions, we have enforced disappearances, we have people we cannot account for, and we detain people beyond the mandatory hours, mandatory days. You have the case of Besigye abducted from Kenya. 30 years down the road, you abduct your senior leaders across border. Besigye left Uganda a few hours, because he didn't spend even in Nairobi 2 hours. He was in his home. Everybody knows where he stays. He reaches Kenya. He's abducted, goes missing, incommunicado for 2 days. Then news start coming from Kenya. Why is it that we cannot respect simple basics of the Constitution? When you go to the question, and it's good we have the principal legal advice of government, there is a troubling case in the IG's office, anti-corruption court, and regarding a register of land titles. Interdicted by the IG, he takes plea in a criminal case. The standing orders are very clear, public service standing orders. Once you're charged in court, you are automatically interdicted until your court is done with your case. A directive comes from the president. Why did you remove a register of titles? Reinstate. Then you have a permanent secretary reinstating a register of titles who has taken a criminal stand in a criminal case in anti-corruption court, interdicted by IG. He's now in office. So are we implementing the Constitution and the laws of Uganda? We are not.
Honorable Wandera, when you hear, especially having been part of the Constitution, the formation of this Constitution, but also hearing the young people that spoke to us, in bliss of what is happening with this Constitution, if you went back in hindsight with what you know now, what would you do different?
You see, the question of the Constitution, you can't be just theoretical about it. Even if I went back to the Constituent Assembly and passed different provisions, assume I did so. Assume I said we made a mistake here, we should have done it this way. The paramount question which will remain will be, will those who come to implement the Constitution implement it in the way those who made the Constitution envisaged that it will be implemented? Yes, you can have the Constitution, and we do have a Constitution, but without constitutionalism, even if I went back and did the matters differently, if there is no culture of constitutionalism, of the people who implement the Constitution sticking to the spirit and letter of the Constitution, it will still not serve any purpose, even if what you change. If you look at implementation, and I'm glad the doctor raised this issue of the people defending the Constitution. And I wanted to add to that, to show why even doing it differently may not be the answer. If you look at the schedule in the Constitution, it provides for oath, which different people must swear before they assume office. This is the president, the vice president, the speaker, cabinet ministers, deputy speaker, members of parliament. That is essentially the two arms of government, the executive and the legislature. So what do they swear to do before they sit in the office? The wording is provided in the Constitution. And it says, I will protect, uphold, preserve, defend the Constitution. These are two arms of government. The holders are saying they are going to protect, they are going to defend, they are going to uphold the Constitution. We all know that the courts, the judiciary, are the custodians of the Constitution. So at the end of the day, you are having all the three arms of government given the duty to make the Constitution work. Because you asked earlier on in the paper, what are the strengths of this Constitution? The strengths come from the people. The Constitution is as good as the people who are implementing it. So, if the president, vice president, members of parliament, speaker, the judiciary, if they do what the Constitution says they should do, protect, support, uphold, it would mean one thing, that we will not be having the controversies which the doctor is talking about, which Ssemujju Nganda is talking about. They will not all be there because all these officers would be protecting and upholding the Constitution. The doctor here is talking about abductions, disappearances, and the Bill of Rights prohibits all that.
Why isn't it working?
It is, in my view,
because you mentioned it clearly and said the president, the vice president, all these, in their pronouncement, they are speaking about defending the Constitution. Every 5 years, Ugandans go to the ballot, but it almost seems like Ugandans are powerless, that the document that's supposed to empower them does not empower them. Where are we failing?
I think part of the problem would be weaknesses in character, human weaknesses, and so on. Because if we came here and we said, Timothy, your work is to have us have contributions about this debate. And you sit there and we sit here, but instead of moderating us, you open a bottle of beer and start drinking it. It would be a weakness on your part. You know what you are supposed to do, but you choose not to do it. So to answer your question, I think that there is also non-committal to the spirit of the Constitution. And here the Attorney General raised a point about changing the Constitution in answer to Ssemujju, about changing the Constitution, like removing the term limit. It is true, the Constitution provides for how it can be changed, and that is normal. But also we cannot lose sight of Ssemujju's point about the history. Because when you are going to change and remove these either term or age limits, yes, Parliament can do so, but you must question yourself, are you doing it for the people of Uganda, or are you doing it for an individual? If you amend the Constitution for an individual, that is already a problem. Because an amendment should be able to answer something for all of us. But now, the two-term limit which Ssemujju is insisting on is the history. I served in a committee too which dealt with the chapters on executive, legislature, and the judiciary. And the two-term limit was a result of our history that we had never had a peaceful transfer of power. Now, we passed it in 1995. Before the end of 2005, before even the 10 years which a president is supposed to serve, we are already changing it. So, yes, you can amend, the law allows it, but what are the reasons behind? That's what will determine whether it is whether you are respecting the spirit of the Constitution or not.
You spoke about the culture. The document is available of the Constitution, and you spoke about constitutionalism. Where did we lose it, especially in achieving that culture of constitutionalism? But also I would like to add something that you have said about the 5 years. Professor Oluka said 10 years are sufficient. After 10 years, it begins to become diminishing returns. 15 years, the leader becomes a liability to the country. What do you make of this assertion?
At the time, we debated it in committee too. Really what informed us was the history. And I'll come to Professor Oloka's assessment. The history that since independence, we have always changed our leaders through violence. Now, whenever you do so, people die. Properties are destroyed. You take people back. People start afresh. There is a lot of suffering. So the two-term limit was supposed to be something which would help us out of that problem. I think to answer your question, where did we lose it? Personally, I believe that if we had stuck to the two-term limit, 2006, President Museveni would have handed over to the BCJ generation. 2016, the BCJ generation would have handed over to the Mao generation. The Mao generation would now be preparing to hand over to the Kiwanuka Kiryowa generation.
The Mao generation.
No, you are not.
So that would allow growth of constitutionalism and growth and bring new ideas into the political arena.
Thank you. Let me come to Honorable Ssemujju. Honorable Ssemujju, you were very vehement when you spoke about the military, and especially their representation. listening posts. Those are some of the things they said, that after 10 years, after getting stability, they'll be able to transition them. In Tanzania, we saw it happen. Where do we find the balance between civilian rule and the military rule? Because these continue to represent the military there, regardless of the other security agencies.
I think in the CA, that's where you had, I think, Kano SJ and now General Tinyefuza and I think Serwanga, when they are debating the issue of multi-party. The president never wanted military people to be engaged in the debate. He actually wrote, I still have that document, because in CA you had an opposition caucus, but you also had a movement caucus, and I guess the Honorable Wandere Ogalo was part of the movement caucus.
Correct.
So the president wrote, and he said when we, for example, go for multi-party democracy, you can't have the army in parliament, because the army, that parliament will be a partisan parliament. I still have that document. The same president insisted that the army should continue being in parliament, and they are still there. He had said because of the contribution made by, at that time controversial, by Tinyefuza and Besigye, that after all your duty is to watch and observe. That's when the word listening post came into being, that the military people are supposed to be listening post. During the removal of term limit, Colonel Fred Bogere chose to abstain. He didn't vote for removal. And Museveni summoned him in Mbari, where he had camped. I think he went with Aronda. Said, you Ogere, they have told him you have become a very big politician in Kampala. You are the one. Said, why didn't you vote for with your colleagues? He said, but we never took a decision as an army. So, and I took your guidance that when you go there, we become listening post. And Ogere was on Katebe until when he retired. So the military is still there. We are on a bit lucky that those 10 seats.
Which side do they sit?
I think Kadaga, when we were arguing, the Honorable Kadaga said they can choose where they want to sit. So they somehow sit in the middle, but they vote with NRM. They are like any other NRM MP. So Kano Bogere does not vote and is reprimanded. So the rest of the military people who are there are supposed, they are in parliament to boost the NRM numbers. Even the way they are selected, because the Army Council is the one that elects military, but in the past, I think now they are directed, but they have to be chieftains. CMY, personnel, they would be the ones to generate a list of candidates. So you don't volunteer, so you don't ask to be a candidate. So they write a list, take it to Mr. Museveni, Commander-in-Chief. He removes some, he says this one remove. And then he brings the list before the Army Council. He says this one is historical, this one is this. So by the time he ends this speech, he has already selected the 7. So they vote for only 3. The 7 are directly elected by Museveni. This one is just a ceremony. And even to remove them. So the military is still there. I remember when J.J. Odongo was appointed Minister of State for Environment, Parliament said a serving military officer cannot be appointed a minister, because this is a partisan role. And J.J. Odongo did not assume that office until he resigned. Later on, Mr. Museveni appointed Aronda. Parliament said, but he also supposed to resign like a J.J. He said, no, he will not resign. From now onwards, military people are serving as ministers. They don't have to resign, from Katumba Wamala to Aronda to everybody else. That's why I said when you asked me at the beginning of this debate, and you wanted me to talk about the 1995 Constitution and ask, is it still there? Maybe in a name. The other day, MPs summoned the CDF, who also happens to be Museveni's son. Says those crowns, how can you summon me? Maybe you will come crawling, I will even come and arrest you. And the speaker was very quick to say, why were you summoning him? This is an office, can't the deputy come? But we have had CDFs, Katumba Wamala, around and everybody appearing for accountability before Parliament. When he was speaking, celebrating the 30 years, he said accountability. Who accounts to who? If you have a CDF whose budget and salary is determined by Parliament, but he says you MPs, I can come and arrest you, he even had a demonstration. Today, you have a CDF who runs a political party. When Lieutenant General now, Henry Tumukunde, went on CBS and Radio 1, and he said, please don't remove the term limit. For 4 years, he was under house arrest at the officers' mess in Kololo, spreading harmful propaganda. He spoke, he says, no removal of term limits. Now you have a CDF who says, we are going into these elections. You will see us Bahima. And he tweets. And we are seeing them. The other day I saw Bobo Wine. He spent the biggest part of the day pushing vehicles because they can't allow him to drive on the main road. So really the Constitution was overthrown. A few provisions that have remained for purposes of facilitating the military dictatorship and family. If they want to arrest you, they will now read for you a particular provision that serves them, but the rest are not there. We can pretend about it. We are under full-blown military dictatorship. That's why I sympathize with the professionals who are advising government. I don't think Kiwanuka Kiryowa, you are the one who advised government to invade the Parliament and beat everybody. But we are beaten. You see, the speaker read a list of MPs. I'm not a very big fan of the speaker read a list of MPs she suspended. She says, you were in this, I have suspended you. I was never read, but I was the first to be removed and beaten. I nearly died. Even when they took me to Nagarama, the first thing they did was taking me to St. Agnes. There is a clinic there. Those fellows, SFC had nearly killed me. We recently we were considering the amendment to the Coffee Act. And again, SFC came. You journalists were arrested, detained in the conference hall of Parliament. They switched off lights, started picking SFC again. So if that is not a military dictatorship, what is it? In fact, we shouldn't be celebrating 30 years of the Constitution. We should be discussing 40 years of military dictatorship.
Let me come back
because this Constitution that may be in a classroom, this should be a classroom debate. The debate of Uganda should be 40 years of military rule, where if you don't have a gun, and now it's no longer even military, but family. Because even military people are also under pressure. I saw, and I keep teasing Erweru. Erweru was a deputy CDF. But Moses Kainerugaba said, you buffoon, this year I will deal with you. He said, my priorities for this year to deal with this buffoon. And the buffoon has since then been chased from the military. So even to stay in the military itself now, you can only stay either if the son or the father wants to stay. Even the military is under pressure. So it is no longer even a military. It is a family military dictatorship. That's what we should be discussing. But to bring here Kiwanuka Kiryowa as if he's giving a lecture to law students is just pretense. The Constitution is no longer there. Finished 100%.
Let me come to the AG.
This one, who was a chairman for organizing parties of a military serving officer, blocking roads. He now has a political party. Recently I saw them, he was in Karangala. The principal legal advisor of government was in Kalangala with members of PLOU, an illegal military outfit turned a political party with a legal principal advisor. He was the one organizing parties for this illegal group. Yeah, we have abused this country to the maximum.
Honorable Ssemujju, every time I listen to you, you are the epitome of infatuation. You know, you are either a grave admirer of President Museveni and his family, or you are simply besotted, for lack of a better word, because you are really absolutely infatuated. I think when you go to sleep, the only thing you think about is the President Museveni, the family, the wife.
I actually,
but the point you're making,
I am bothered by family rule.
The point you make,
which you are serving.
The point you fail to make, the point you fail to make, or to in this whole run around of yours, is the problem has nothing to do with the Constitution.
The problem didn't even wait for you to say now it is your turn.
No, you told me.
Honorable, the Honorable AG,
you didn't wait.
Because you are really interested. Because you are this infatuation is something, you know.
You didn't
it is bordering on insanity.
What is the difference between you? For you, they have turned, instead of being a principal legal advisor, you are chairman of their parties.
Yes,
that's the big job.
Where's the problem?
You should be advising a serving military officer not to have a political party.
No, but he doesn't have a political party that I know of, because I believe that Honorable Ssemujju Nganda, having been in Parliament for so long, would have actually at least learned how a political party is set up. So at least I would have thought that you would figure that out. But that notwithstanding.
Honorable Kiryowa Kiwanuka, the question of governance was one of the things that was in our preamble, especially on the instability and the politics. He addresses the military. Do we still need the military in Parliament? Because one of the things that I remember, especially when Honorable Wandera was there, is that there was an agreement that after 10 years they would leave if the stability is there. Are we still in instability that we still need the army in Parliament per the Constitution?
But that agreement is not in the Constitution. So if there was an agreement, are you saying there are some things we agreed on which we did not put in the Constitution?
So did the Tanzanians. It wasn't in the Constitution.
Yeah, but that is why they put the provision on amendment. So when you determine that you no longer need it, that's how you do it. But you can't tell me that we had an agreement, because first of all, I wasn't there. So what we get is what we read and what we see as the agreement. So what is in the agreement is in the four corners of that Constitution. So don't tell me about agreements that were made on the side which were not put in the Constitution, because my job is not to advise on how the law should be, but how it is.
Okay.
You see, the Constitution, now like talking about the Constitution, says the military must be subordinate to civilian role. So did you advise Mohoz to come and appear before the civilian?
Did you?
When he said, I will come and arrest you clowns.
No, well, I don't know whether he called you clowns, but if he did, I do not know what empirical data he used to arrive at that conclusion. Maybe my research may come to a different conclusion. But our fellow panelists here has been talking about...
You will go in around.
No.
The issue is, the Constitution says they should be subordinate to civilian role.
Yes, and they are subordinate to civilian role.
The civilian is someone, your friend, and he says, I will not come, and he didn't come.
Yes, and you, the member of parliament, what did you do about it? Because you have the power.
We apologized.
Ah, you see? Yeah. So you actually exercised your mandate in the Constitution by apologizing.